today on Back to Basics month, we are talking about our climb and how we can start to make it more exciting, more interesting, and put our own stamp on it. Now, some of the stuff you've already learned, asking questions, what am I doing with my hands? What am I doing with my legs? All these things very much apply to our climbs as well. But today I'm going to give you some concrete examples that you can follow along with and try at home. Before you join in with this today, there are a few tutorials you probably want to check out first. The first is your climbing tutorial. The second is your level up your climb tutorial. This is where we start to talk about technique and go a little bit deeper into our climb. And finally, it will help if you've done your spinning climb tutorial, although not as important. Let's start by talking about what we do with our arms. So when we first learn to climb, we tend to go with both arms nice and high. If you've then done my level your climb up tutorial, we start to use a forearm push. And this really helps in the way that we're moving our legs. But there are other options. So the next thing we're going to look at is a half bracket grip, or at least that's what I call this. And this is like a thumbs up bracket grip. Now, the benefits to this one for some people is that I do find some people struggle with the elbow position, and they tend to have the elbow kind of popping off one way or the other. Now, with practice, they would be able to get there, but it's because the hand position is not necessarily super strong. So I would say for most people, it's probably a strength thing. So what they tend to want to do is like wrap all of the fingers, and then it puts the elbow in a weird position. So this allows us to keep some distance and have a really good hand grip. It's one of those days, sorry. Really good hand grip. You feel like you've got your whole hand holding onto the pole. Now, the risk with this one is anyone with weak or dodgy wrists. Okay, this one is a little bit more intense in terms of the positioning. Our wrist is going into, can I remember if it's ulnar or radial deviation, but it is going essentially into the end range of the joint. I've spoken about this before, and I'm sure I'll speak about it again. Anytime when our joint is kind of at its maximum, so with our wrist that is ulnar and radial deviation, when we are in those positions rather than a neutral position, we are at the most vulnerable part of that joint. So we have to be pretty damn strong in order to protect the joint. So if you get any pain with this one, or any kind of nervy things going on, anything weird, or you know you're susceptible to those things, you might want to skip this one. So all we're really going to do is thumb up with the hand. Now, I tend to go for what is a right angle almost with my arm. So that's kind of my height. So for me, that's kind of like at the bottom of my ribs, okay? You can go a bit lower, although this pushes the wrist into a more extreme position. And same with higher, it's also an extreme position, but also, actually, it's not, it's the opposite. Oh my God, this is going to take forever. Okay. Let's start by looking at how we can experiment with our arms. So when we first learn to climb, we tend to do it with both arms up, and we're really focusing more on what the legs are doing. Now, if you've done my level up your climb tutorial, you will know that the second option I generally give is this forearm position. Now, this can be actually quite challenging for some people, and some of the options I give today may be better for some people. They may be worse for some people. This is why it's a bit of a minefield teaching online, because the best advice is always advice that's tailored to you. Okay, so you've got to listen to your body. But the reason why some people find this harder is because of the hand grip. We don't actually have a very good hand grip, okay? With the finger running up the pole, the wrist being in alignment with the pole, okay? There's not a whole lot of grip in this hand. This arm really is functioning more as a pushing arm, which means that top arm is doing more of the work. So a lot of people will try and wrap all the fingers. When you wrap all the fingers, what tends to happen is the elbow does start to pop off, and you don't really have that push anymore, or whether it goes one way or the other, okay? So this second option, or third option technically in terms of arms, is a half bracket grip. Now, the good thing about this is we have the push that keeps us away from the pole, okay, which is obviously really helpful. We have better hand grip. More of our hand is in contact with the pole. It's a grip that we are more used to. The problem with this one is the position that it puts our wrist into. It's not a very neutral or safe position for some people, okay? So we have to be pretty strong in the wrist. So if you are someone who has a lot of wrist issues, you know this, or you get any pain whilst you're doing this, I don't recommend it, okay? You probably need to go and see a physio and do some work on strengthening your wrists before you come back and look at this one. Now, the reason why is because it starts to push the wrist up into this kind of a position where the thumb is coming towards the body. Now, anytime we put a joint in its end range position, so this would be one end range position of my wrist joint, this would be another, and this would be neutral, okay? So whenever we're in those end ranges, that is the place that is the most vulnerable because we're hanging into the tendons and ligaments of the joint, okay? So we have to be extra, extra strong to be in that position. So with this one, ways that we can make it safer is not having it too low. The lower it is, the more it bends up through the wrist. But equally, if it's too high, you're not really going to be able to push with it very well, okay? This is the whole point of the second arm, is to push with it. For me, a comfortable position is where my arm is almost at a right angle. So that is putting my hand about rib height, okay? So my top arm goes as high as I can. My bottom arm, I'm already starting to push, and I'm not pushing just through the arm, through the wrist, sorry. I don't want to be like letting my shoulder pop up. I'm pushing all the way from my shoulder blade. I do talk about this in the shoulder pole myth, shoulders back and down video. You can find that in the technique section. So I'm going to really push and be strong. Now you can either go one leg at a time if that feels more appropriate. That will also be safer if your wrists are weaker, okay? Or you can bring both legs up together. Now when we go for the second one, this can be a bit awkward. So we can either just shuffle the hands up. Now I only really have enough room in here to do one good climb, like 1.5. So it's hard to demonstrate this. Or something we're going to talk about a little bit more in a minute is swapping the hands. Now, swapping the hands generally in most climbs looks neater, okay? So the other option is once the legs are on, you're going to swap. Now, the problem with this one is this arm's quite high, so now we have to bring it down. So for this one, you can definitely swap it, and it will still look good, but it's probably not as nice visually as some of the other climbs, okay? So that is your half bracket grip. Feel free to pause at any point to try these, okay? So one more time very quickly, your top arm, which is usually the back leg, okay, same arm as the leg, is going to be nice and straight. Second arm in a position, okay, where you are strong and you can feel a good push, not too low, not too high. Again, our anatomy is all different. It may not be the same place as me. Push through that arm and either bring on your back leg first, making sure you're pushing it into the pole, or you can start to bring both legs up together, okay? Second option with the arms. I say second because second today. We've already looked at a few previous to this video. Split grip. So this one is much harder to do. And the reason why it's much harder to do is because the hand tends to go where the knees need to go, depending on how high you are able to get your knees in your climb. So we're going to have our arm on top, same as before, but this time we're now going to go into a split grip position. And we really want to make sure we've got that index finger pointing down the pole for the same reason as what we talked about with the last one. When we wrap the fingers, we are putting the wrist into, I think it's ulnar deviation, okay? Again, it's this end range of the joint. It's a riskier place to be. Now, this, I would say, isn't necessarily easier or harder than the last option, but it may suit some people better. It may be worse for some people. Like most things, it kind of depends on what's going on with you. You may have a wrist injury that is only triggered in certain positions, and it might be fine in this one, it might not. So try it, listen to your body. If it doesn't feel good, don't do it. Again, we're mainly hanging off this top arm, so we need to be fairly strong. Now, I know we're starting with the hardest ones today, I think, the split grip climbs, okay? So don't worry if you're going, oh my God, if I can't do these, how am I going to do all the other options in this video today? You will be able to, okay? There's lots of things here that you'll be able to do and play with. I actually wanted to get the hardest ones out of the way first before we get too tired. So arm nice and high, index finger pointing down the pole, and we want to make sure we're not too close or too far, okay? Again, everybody's different, but we want to be able to have a strong pull through the top arm and a strong push through the bottom arm. If you're too close, you're just going to hang off your top arm. If you're too far, all of the weight goes into your bottom arm. So find somewhere where you feel you've got both of those things happening, a pull and a push. Now we're going to bring the legs up. Now what I'm going to do with this one is initially I am going to be using my ankles to grip. So I go more like a fireman spin position with my knees out, and I'm going to squeeze my feet into the pole. As my knees come in, I'm taking that hand off. So we do have a moment where we are almost entirely hanging by our top arm. We do have a little bit of feet grip, but not a lot. Okay, so this one's probably, in some respects for some people, harder. So, arm nice and high, index finger down the pole, so we've got a nice strong wrist, get the right distance for you. Bring the legs on, ankles first. Squeeze the knees into the gap, and then start to pull yourself up. Okay, let's do it one more time, and then we'll look at one more thing we can talk about with our arms. So, arm nice and high, index finger down the pole on that bottom arm. You can go one leg at a time, same as before, or you can do both together. Bring the hands out as the knees come in. Pull yourself up. Okay, last thing we can talk about. We will talk briefly about swapping, but let me show you how that works in practice. And we also want to think about what our hand is doing. We don't want to just shuffle it up. Now remember, there is a whole video on arms and hands, so you can go and have a little look at that if you want to. But the cleanest thing to do with this one is like circle it up to the pole. So each time we're climbing, we're doing this beautiful circle. Now obviously in here I don't have much height, so it's going to be hard to do this nicely. I might do a pseudo climb really low so you can see this more clearly, but it is a hard one to do in a small space. So this one works best, in my opinion, when we've got the forearm position, especially if we get the forearm in the right place. So for me, it's sort of just below my boobs. Okay, I'm getting old and they're not where they used to be, but it's not really high and it's not really low. It's kind of just slightly, you can see this kind of slope, okay, down from my shoulder. Top arm is nice and high. So I'm going to go low. And what I'm going to do is my bottom arm is going to circle as I lead with my hips. And then when I come up, if I've got my arms just right, my second arm should be in the perfect position for the forearm grip. Okay, so I've swapped arms. And then I can bring my legs up and I can repeat. Now, my legs are already getting sore with all this climbing on this grippy pole, as I knew it would. So I'm not going to do that again. But essentially the key is, each time I am swapping my arms. I'm never shuffling, okay? Now this makes your climb so much more fluid. One movement flowing in to the next, okay? Now, in terms of the hands and arms, like I said, there's already a video that really goes into that. But I'm thinking of caressing the air, and I'm going with my palm facing to the ceiling first. So it's kind of like my hands coming forward, and it goes down, and then as it comes up, it turns back to the pole. So I'm kind of like, almost like I'm brushing the floor with my fingertip. I don't want to go backwards like I'm petting a cat, okay? It's going to be the back of your hand, and then it turns as it comes up, okay? That's kind of the specific detail. And there's so many other things we could do with our hands as we climb, for sure. So, for example, if we are climbing, maybe you want to do like a little bum wiggle. We're going to talk about this more in a minute. And you could be wafting your arms, you know, and that would be something that you put between each climb to kind of jazz it up. But in terms of like the fluid movement, Alternating is a pretty solid way of making it look so much better. Let's now look at what we're doing with our body and our legs. Now, arguably, different arm positions can also work with different leg positions. It's kind of a bit of mix and match. I'm not going to show you all of the potential combinations today, so feel free to experiment a little bit if you feel comfortable with doing so. That may not be today. Today you may just be digesting this information, and then in your next training session you might experiment with it. So we're going to start with how we move from the hips. Now, I do talk about this in the Leveling Up Your Climb tutorial, I'm sure, so I'm not going to go into huge detail. This is a pretty nice standard way of getting yourself up in your climb that uses less energy. So what I often see when people are learning to climb is they'll kind of bring their legs on and then they're kind of going straight up and they're pulling with their arms. Now, if we think about leading with the hips, almost like we're doing a reverse body roll, our arms get to do a lot less work, okay? What we have to remember, and something I learned when I started rock climbing many years ago, is that our leg muscles are much more strong and robust generally than our upper body. Now, obviously, being pole dancers, that's a bit debatable, but generally, in most cases, we want to use the bigger, more robust muscles to do things rather than the smaller muscles. So this is a good example of when we can do that, because we're going to use our glutes, we're going to use our legs, we're going to use our core rather than our little arms, okay? So what I would do is I would go for my climb. My legs are on. I'm going to lean backwards with my chest and I'm going to push through my hips. So my hips are the leading thing. So let me show you this more slowly from a lower down position. It's hard to do slow in the air, okay? So you kind of want to go for it. But this is me. Imagine I've just done my climb. So I'm going to start to lean back with my chest and I'm going to push forward with my hips, squeezing my bum. So my hips come to the pole first, then my chest. And this does make it a lot easier once you get used to it, okay? So that's the first option, which can be used with pretty much any arm position. Second thing we're going to look at is moving sideways from the hips. This is very similar. So both of the first one we've just done, the kind of leading with the hips, and the second one, which is going to be a sideways movement, these are both energetically easier, okay? They tend to feel and actually use less energy. So with this one, we're going to go in a sideways motion. The legs are going to do most of the work. So I go for my climb. I'm going to drop my head down. I'm going to straighten my legs first, and then I'm going to lead up with my chest. So let's look at that again. So we're going away from the arm that is on top, which is usually the leg that is pushing. So if I've got my right hand on top, my right leg would be pushing. So I'm going to lean down to the left. My left arm is on, my left leg is pushing, I'm leaning down to the right. So lean away from your top straight arm. So let me show you, let's continue from this angle. I think it's probably the best angle, and I'll do one back for you as well. So we bring the legs on. I start to drop my head down. And now what I'm going to do is straighten my legs first, and I'm turning my hips to the side. Okay, so initially I was facing straight on, now I'm facing to the side of the room, and then leading with an arch through the back. Let me show you a back view as well. My socks are getting all tangled here, wait a minute. Okay, so right hand is on top and I'm going down to the left. So I drop my head down first, and then I stick my right bum cheek up to the pole. My hips are now facing to the left, and then I pull myself up and round. Okay, so that's another option. I think this one tends to look maybe a little bit nicer on a spin pole. I'm not showing you anything on spin today just because you won't be able to see what's going on as I'm traveling around the pole. Pretty much everything we're learning you can do on spin as well. So Also experiment with your spinning climb. Okay, the next thing we're going to look at is legs. So there's a few different things that we can do here. The first one is we can actually have a straight leg. I actually really like climbing this way. I use it quite often. Tends to work best for me on spin, but I will show you on static. So by this point, hopefully, if we've done all the prerequisites, you should know and understand that we are climbing primarily with our knees and less so with our feet. Now, obviously, we looked at that split grip version where we had to use the feet a little bit more, and certainly the feet do some work. Primarily, it's the knees. Now, we're going to use our knees a lot more with this one. So for this version, what we're going to do is instead of bringing the front leg round the front, we're going to straighten it. So I'm going to bring both legs together, or you can do one at a time. Okay, back leg first, and it's going to come on straight. Now my knees are still at the same height. I don't want it lower or much harder, but higher. We want those knees to be together, and we want to actively be squeezing them into the pole. And with this one, I'm actually turning slightly towards the straight leg with my hips, which helps to lock me in just a little bit. And then we're going to use the same technique we did at the beginning, kind of leading with the hips. The hips are the thing that's rolling up. So if I've got my right hand on top, that means my right leg is pushing, my left leg is straight and slightly tilted, okay? And then I would lead with my hips. One more time. Pushing leg, nice and high always with the legs. I didn't mention this. I'm sure I must have spoken about it in the leveling your climb up, but when we're climbing, the higher we can get our legs, the easier our climbs are going to be, the higher we're going to get with less effort. So pushing leg comes on, other leg comes straight, squeeze the knees together, push with the pushing leg, lead with the hips. Okay, there's another option. Now we get into things that are a little bit more experimental and more about what you do between your climbs, okay? So the first one we're going to look at is hip circles. So we can use any of the techniques we've used so far to get us up into that middle point just before you go for your second climb. Hip circles look like this. Okay, you've probably seen someone do something similar at some point. Now this is fairly simple if our legs are holding us. So imagine I've just done my first climb. I'm not quite going to go for a second one, but you might do. I'm going to keep my hands low and I'm going to stick my bum down and back. I'm going to go left, down, right, up, left, down, right, up. Let me show you this from behind. And you can try this from the floor first before you try it in the air. So hands need to be low, about chest height. So I stick my bum out to the left first. I then start to let my bum come away as it sinks down, like I'm sitting onto a chair. So I go left, down, right, up, left, down, right, up. You could also go right, down, left, up. You can go whichever direction feels most natural for you, but you've got to really squeeze your legs. So don't forget your legs in the middle. Let me show you one more time in the air. And like I said before, the whole way through this, just pause when you want to have a little go at something. So I do my first climb. My hands come to chest height, and I'm going down and up. So left, down, right, up, or right, down, left, up. And the way in which direction you go in also may be dictated or feel more natural depending on which way you're spinning if you're doing it with a spin. Okay, you might not be. But if I was going clockwise, okay, so I'm spinning this way around the pole, I think I would want to kind of make my movement go with that. So I would go right to left, I would go clockwise. If I was spinning anti-clockwise, again, I would probably want my hips to go with that direction. So my hips would go anti-clockwise, they would go left to right, okay? That's probably the way that would feel most natural and work the best. Okay, 2 more things to look at. Hanging climb, swinging climb. Swinging climb, I'm actually going to do a video on how we swing on the pole. In aerial, they often call this beats, okay? So I'm not going to go into super detail today. I will, like I say, I will create a separate tutorial for these. So let's start with the hardest one with our beats. Now, I would probably do a climb, then beat, then climb. So again, it's that middle point. However, because of height in here, I'm going to start with my beat. Okay, I'll try and show you a little climb first in a moment, but let's start with the beat. So with your beat, you're going to reach really high, super, super high, and your second arm is going to hug the pole. And what we're going to do is really squeezing everything as hard as we can. We're going to swing forwards and back, forwards and back. Okay. Now, there's nothing in my body that isn't squeezing. As I swing my legs forwards, I'm going to stick my bum out and my tummy back a little bit, because otherwise this one is a little bit of a fanny basher, okay? We don't want to hit our delicate parts into the pole. So as you're coming with the legs forward, you're on your chest and you're sticking your bum back. As you push the legs backwards, you're squeezing your bum and you're arching. So again, your hips shouldn't come to the pole. We are constantly on our chest, bouncing off our chest. Probably either just on the sternum or a little bit below, depending on how bendy you are. And I'm squeezing my legs really tight. Now, you don't want to take them back and just kind of stop. You're using it like boom, boom, like you're bouncing off of your back point. So once you hit your maximum, straight away, bring it forward. Use the momentum generated from hitting that wall, okay? So reach really high, hug, and swing, and swing. Now, if you want to go into a climb from here, as we go backwards, we're going to bring the legs up. So essentially, you go to your maximum, then the legs start to travel up as you're coming back in. Now, we have to be careful to be controlled with this. And the challenge is, we're going to go from hugging the pole like this to a forearm push in that swing. Okay, so I'll do this one as a slow-mo. I'll come in and edit it. Watch what I do with my arm. So I'm hugging. Okay, that arm comes in, and that allows me to slow myself down so I'm not slamming my legs into the pole. And that's why this one's challenging, because mid-air, we've got to change our grip. We go from a hug to a push. Hug, push. Okay, so we have to get enough momentum so that we have not too much weight in that bottom arm. Okay, let me show you this a little bit higher, as if I was just on a climb. So let's say I climb, I reach high, I swing, I'm hanging, I swing, my elbow comes round, my legs come up, I repeat. And you could do this repeatedly, you could do it once, again, we can mix and match with these in any way you want. Okay, last option is our hang climb. Similar concept, but we're not going to swing. Okay, so this one's easier. So all we're going to do, again, it's hard in here because I don't have the height, but I'm going to do a little climb. I'm going to reach high. I'm going to hang, and I'm going to lift my legs back, and then I'm going to bring them in, and then I would do the same. Hang, climb. Okay. Now, in terms of shapes we make with our legs in the middle, there's so many options, and you could totally experiment. But I've just been either going like back like this, or I've been bending a leg, or I've been bending both legs. Those are the 3 main ones that kind of come to me, but I'm sure there's lots of things you could do in between if you experimented and has a little play. Okay, a lot of information, a lot of climbing. If you're anything like me, by the end of the session, your shins are really hurting. I've probably lost all of my skin. But hopefully you've enjoyed playing with your climb a little bit more, going a little bit deeper and seeing what is possible and how we can make it more interesting. If you have any questions, as always, please let me know. And don't forget to train smarter, not harder.